I just found the most incredible thing when it comes to how we calculate inflation. I'm like Doc Brown in Back to the Future. 78, 88.8, 88.6 kilowatts, Marty. And look at my office here. Other than, remember Doc Brown had Einstein. Yeah, Einstein can kiss my big fat behind. I got all this other stuff right here. Just, you're the important. I'm a big old mess, just like Doc Brown. You know what I'm saying? But be it as it may, I cannot believe. I'm just some guy in a, oh my goodness, inside out t-shirt with some dogs. I have brushed my teeth, but other than that, I haven't done anything. Other than read and research. I cannot believe I discovered this. I cannot be the only one who's seen this. It's crazy. Anyway, I want to show you. I'm going to take it straight to the chase here. This right here, Consumer Price Index for all urban consumers, that's CPIU, covers 93% of American population. All right. This is for 2011. We're going to go to 2011. Relative importance. That's the weighting that we use to calculate CPI. I'm going to cut straight to the chase. All right, we're going to go straight to the chase. Housing in 2011, 41% of CPIU was geared towards housing. All right, so 41% of inflation was due to your housing cost. All right, everybody with me so far? So what we're going to do is going to go over here. We're going to actually look at the actual expenditures of what people bought in 2011. All right, so we're going to look at the Consumer Expenditure Survey. Right. This is literally what people bought, what they used with their money. 122,000 consumer units, i.e. households. 63,000 is the average pre-tax. 61,000 is the average after-tax. All right, so we have 122,000 households. 61,000 is the average net of taxation. Now, this is even skewed to the higher end because, again, average. You always want to use median if you can, but averages in this case they skew it to Bill Gates. It takes one Bill Gates spending all his money on whoever knows what kind of chicks he's spending his money on to equate a million Joshes, if that makes sense. All right, anyway, so we got 61,000 net of taxes, but that's not where we're using this for the Consumer Expenditure Survey because we have 61,000 bucks, but we only spend 49,000. So where did the other 12,000 go? Just floated around out there. But it's interesting, is it not? Because our Consumer Expenditure Survey shows what we spent the money on. And we're going to cut to the chase. Remember, we said if we had housing of 41% of our consumption, right, and we consumed $49,705, $49,705, we should spend $20,379 on housing. But what did we actually spend on housing? $16,803. $3,500 difference. That's not that much, is it, huh? To divide by 16,803. That's a 22% differential in what the CPI says you're going to wait for your cost of living increases versus what you actually spend. Only thing that matters is what you actually spend your money on. Nothing else matters. What did you actually consume? So on top of that, we had $12,000 was just floating around out there that wasn't consumed, i.e. saved, paid down debt, I don't know. But in terms of our consumption, relative to what CPI inflation does, we spent $16,803 on housing, which is a significant difference. We take $16,803 divided by our total expenditures. That's a 33.8%. So CPI for housing should be 33.8. I'm going to show you where I found this. I said, oh, I can't believe it. Anyway, so shelter, according to the Consumer Expenditure Survey, was basically $9,812, all right? And if we factor 9,812, we subtract mortgage interest and charges, 6,277. We subtract property taxes, interesting, huh? 3,351. And guess what we have left right there? Maintenance, repairs, insurance, and expenses, which is exactly what people who owned a house probably spent. The average person spent about $10,000 on their housing, right? $10,000, which includes your mortgage payment, which includes your property taxes and your maintenance and repair. That's your actual dollars being consumed for your housing cost. But that's not what we use. If we're going to use that right there, we say 9812 divided by $49,000 should be our total. That should be a 20% of our CPI weighting. And then you got utilities, another $3,000 here. You got household operations, and you got household furnishings. So when all said and done, we should spend literally $16,000. Because if you look at housing is $16,557. But we look at shelter, 9812. We look at utilities, 3660. We look at household operations, 1007. And we look at this right here, household furnishings and equipment, 1467. So our total expenditures on housing for a homeowner is about $16,000. Divide by $49,000, and our weight should be 32% for total housing. And yet, if you go back to this guy right here, shelter is about 31.59%. So where does this other housing come from? I hope this is making sense, man. Our total housing expenditures in real dollars is about this right here for shelter. But they're saying housing is actually 41%. Why? Oh, because they use this owner's equivalent rent of residence. What the hell? What the hell is that? I mean, we know what that is. That's what I said in the video earlier today, which I hopefully made sense, but was implicit rent that you have to pay. So they're using a CPI that's significantly higher than real world cost. Why do they do that? Well, I'll show you why. Yeah, I hope this makes sense. We're not spending anywhere near what they're saying we're spending on housing. Not anywhere near. Oh, by the way, if you don't have a mortgage, guess what happens? This right here goes away. Which one is that? This right here, the 3184. This right here, mortgage right there. That goes away. Now you still got your property taxes, you still have your maintenance and stuff, but this is what we should use, the actual expenditures, not this made up crap of OER, owner's equivalent rent. So let me show you something here. This, I want to show you something. We're going to go to 1984. All right. Old series for CPIU. New series. We don't really care so much the CPIW. We care about CPIU because it's pretty much all inclusive. Old series is column D. New series is column B. Let's go down to housing. Remember, the reason I'm picking on housing because it's by far and away the biggest component of CPI. Right there. Old series, 37%. I mean, the old series right there, if we look at shelter, check this out. That's all we care about. Shelter. Right there. 28%. And this is 1984, so we can increase a little bit, it's fine. But still, you see that? 28% with shelter. Watch this. All this right here, home ownership, 22%, home purchase, home financing, not available because now they use owner's equivalent rent, household owner's equivalent rent. 13% of CPI is on owner's equivalent rent. This is 1984 because they got rid of the actual costs that people were paying, instead started using these OER. Now here, it actually benefited because they had less cost of housing, but not anymore. Not anymore. Now that people have more cost of housing in terms of the current CPIU versus before. So isn't that crazy? In 1984, they got rid of the actual cost of home ownership, and instead they replaced it with owner's equivalent rent. What? And what? And then they increased residential rent. Look at that. Rent residential went from $5,100 to renter's cost went to $7,100. What is that about? It's crazy. And you can see NA. They didn't use in the new one home ownership, home purchase, financing, taxes, and insurance, what I just told you about. Property insurance, property taxes. I don't care about your stupid owner-occupied equivalent rent. I care about these things. How much is my financing? How much is my property insurance? How much is my property taxes? How much is my contracted mortgage interest cost? And in fact, if you factor in, you get rid of mortgage interest costs, that's 9.1% gone from CPI. Look at that, financing and taxes. I mean, that's 11%, of which includes property insurance and property tax, which makes sense. But 9% of overall CPI is gone if I have no mortgage. And yet, that is not happening here. Owner's equivalent rent never goes away. In fact, if we look at, what was it here? 1 second. Again, if we look at it's 41% now of CPI. And the owner's equivalent rent is now 24%. Regardless if you paid your mortgage off or not. Does that make any flipping sense? No, of course not. Of course it doesn't. I mean, it used to be 13% owner equivalent rent. Now, what did we say it was? Well, it's 24% of CPI? That doesn't make any sense. It makes no sense. What they should do is, what's your average rental cost? What's your average interest? I don't understand. So now we're going to go to let's go back even further. We're going to go to 1980 and 81. I haven't done this, but we're going to check it out and see what they had. All urban cost CPU. There we go. We're not going to CPIW, CPIU. And we're going to look at what they did back then too for households. Housing, 45%. Finances. Remember, interest rates are quite high back then. Property insurance, mortgage costs. See what I'm saying? 10,000 in 1980, 9,800 1981. This is the way it should be. As interest rates went down and people started paying less and less for mortgage interest, then the CPI weighting for mortgage for housing should go down, but it's not. Weird, man. And on top of that, as people pay off their mortgage, that's not being reflected in the CPI. I don't get it. You don't get it either. It's the weirdest thing. Let's keep going. Let's look back to 1952 to 1960 weightings. Housing right there, 32%. They're for entire housing. Keep it simple, stupid. That's what it should be. That's weird, man. Because I'm looking right here, and you guys can't see this, but I'll show you. This is in 2012. I am showing 32.7% is for housing costs total of your regular expenses. $1, 33 cents every dollar goes to your expenditures, not your income. Your expenditures goes to mortgage, or not mortgage, your housing costs. But of that, mortgage interest was 3,000 of that. Then you still got, so 3,000 is quite a lot of money. If you didn't have that for your rent, your housing costs, it'd drop your expenditures on your housing down to less than 30%. And then you still got your stupid, they still are showing for housing, the rental dwellings. I just don't understand that. What's the point of that? That's weird to me. They still got household furnishings and equipment, housekeeping supplies, household operations, utilities, fuels, and public service. All that stuff makes sense to me. But this is just in perpetuity that says owner's equivalent rent will forever be a part of CPI, regardless if you have paid off your mortgage or not. It's weird, man. It's weird numbers. I don't get it. Nefarious? I don't know. I bet there's something. Well, I don't know. I literally don't know, because if they wanted to keep CPI down for Social Security, they would go back to the old one. But I don't know. I don't know what's going on. I don't put anything on these people that they're doing good or bad. I just have no idea. All I know is I found it. So if I'm sitting here thinking, Josh, how much should I, because I had this question, how much should I use for my inflation? Because if the numbers are wrong, what they're using, there has to be a right number, right? Well, one thing we're doing, Daniel Coolbert and I are working on, we're going to do a Monte Carlo based on, this is CPI total going back to 1913. And because there's really no reason not to have a Monte Carlo on inflation. It doesn't make sense. You have a Monte Carlo on investments, why not inflation? And what you'll see here is we have the average CPI, average inflation, go back to 1913 was 3.2%. But the standard deviation was 4.7, which meant within 3 standard deviations, you could have, which is 99.8% of the probability, you could have a high side of inflation of 17.3 and a low side of -10, or basically -11. And what we'll see here is that's pretty much spot on. So we go to annualize right here. We're going to see a high side, I think it was a 19. Remember, the highest we had was 17.3 with a 99 7.8%. We had one right in 1918 is at 18%. So that's a little bit outside the 3 standard deviations, but still pretty close. And then 1920, we had a deflation of 10.5%, which is the lowest, and then 9.9. So my numbers in terms of standard deviation are spot on, literally spot on. And that's what we're working on, Daniel Coolbert at 55e.co, and I creating a standard deviation relative to CPI. Now, I'm not even going to use CPI because, again, why would we have 32% housing in our total cost of expenditures when, in fact, part of the good portion of that is due to mortgage interest and whatnot? We're not going to have that. So, this is what I'm working on. I'm saying, look at that too, by the way. Alcoholic beverages, tobacco back in 1960 was 4.3. What? Reading and I like recreation, I like personal care, I like medical care. Transportation is way too high. Apparel way too high for retirees. Food is high, and that's where it should be. But anyway, the point being, I like this much, much better, the older CPI numbers, because food is as a higher weight than they do now. Now I think the food weighting is, was it 13% or something? I can't remember. It was like 12%, if memory serves. And I don't like that at all. If we go back to this guy right here, and this is 2000. How much did we actually spend on food right here? Well, maybe it is right, about 64.58 on 49,000. Divided by 49,000 roughly, and about 13%. So I'm looking at CPI would consist of 15% for food, and I would suggest food. You have to look at what your expenditure. This is where you got to know your expenses, man. Food and expenditures expenditures are the big deal. Then you can factor in, okay, how much of my expenditures are going to various items? And then we can give you a standard deviation of Monte Carlo, frankly, for the items of those properties, i.e. food, i.e. healthcare, all that stuff. You see what I'm saying? It's that's the way to do it, because to say I'm 3.2%, that's just based on. It's literally based on nothing. It's just pulling something out of your butt and saying there it is, and sticking to the wall. Like the physicists do about never mind, I won't go any further. Gravity. It makes sense. Or dark matter. Dark matter has to work. Why? Because if it didn't work, then all of our numbers would be wrong. Physicists are nothing more than mathematicians anymore. It's sad, man. It's just sad. Improve a photon? Try it. Anyway. All right, love your thoughts. This is huge in my opinion. And this is just me yapping. But I want to have you rechange your mind on inflation, because it's not nearly what people think. Historically, it could be in the future. Hell's bells. Look at what's going on in Argentina right now. But all right, put a comment. We'll see you.